Welcome to Dynamics Unplugged. Today we have Andy Zehr of Argano. Andy, welcome.
Thanks, Drew. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, it's really exciting to have you here. It's a little bit selfish for me. I've gotten a chance to work with you the past few years. I remember when we started working together, and I dragged you to California for a couple of weeks with me, and we got to know each other as we were in the depths of a go live together. But for those who are not introduced, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. And actually, that was my first SoCal experience, so I gotta thank you for that. My background, I've worked in IT pretty much my whole adult professional career. Um, I went to school for what was called computer networking, but really was like sysadmin. So I was what I consider to be that hardcore tech IT guy. Had several system administrator roles out of college. Got hired at a company that was going through a divestiture. They were part of a large industrial group of probably 40 or so different entities that were owned by some major corporations. And uh, they were going through that separation process and basically needed their entire IT infrastructure stood up from the ground up. So we're talking phone systems, email, domain access, and an ERP system. I had no experience with ERP. I didn't really even know what it meant. They were on a old green screen type product called QAD.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever heard of that one, but
I actually
it's
have.
okay.
I had one previous client who was on it.
Yep. So it was a manufacturing specific ERP. Um, they went through selection process that I was kind of tangentially involved in. Just being an IT guy, I was really again focused on email and phones and that kind of stuff, but got more and more pulled into the ERP project. They selected Dynamics at the time; it was AX 2009. So I was part of that implementation from the business side. Just kind of by default, being the IT guy, started getting support tickets to support the system and
Mhm.
learned more and just really became, um, I guess, adept in dynamics. I had an opportunity back in 2016 to get into consulting with a small partner. Did that for a few years and just really enjoyed it and have continued to grow. And here we are. Um,
It's interesting.
so,
I started as an end user as well, not on the same path as you, I guess. I didn't have all the kind of standing upright an IT team and all the infrastructure background. Mine was more on the functional end, a business
mhm.
analyst type role. But so coming from another ERP tool, I guess that was manufacturing specific to Dynamics. There's probably a lot of questions the business had around if Microsoft Dynamics could support that. What type of manufacturing did that company do? What was their product?
They made brake hose assemblies for
Okay.
cars and trucks. So it was really more of a assembly. They did have some manufacturing where they were actually assembling raw materials and making something new, but primarily assembly. I was just gonna say, when I got hired, I didn't know anything about their business. I didn't know anything about their current system, so I was completely in the dark. Trying to act as that go-between and figure out like what are these guys even talking about when they say a bomb? Oh, that's a bill of materials. That's the stuff that goes into what they're making. Got it. Okay. Like it was a
Yeah,
huge learning curve for me to start with.
I felt the same. I didn't come from an engineering background or anything like that. So product design, even though I got heavily involved from the systematic end early in my career, that was a newer aspect for me. Uh, the ERP side of things was slightly different. I was an end user that had just transitioned to Exapta 3.0 at the time, I
Hmm.
believe. And yeah, it's a big learning curve, especially I think at that time for Dynamics. It was still early on in Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people came from the damn guard side of it, and the community and background and the investment on the Microsoft end is not anywhere near what it is now, for sure. But I guess my question to you, and I saw maybe some of this coming from also not knowing the business. We were a photonics manufacturer. I didn't know anything about the research labs that were using our optical lenses and our microscopes and all these things. Do you think the business, either from the operation side or even the technology side, hence, do they see or have any hesitation? And is Dynamics good enough for the uniqueness maybe of our industry and those products we make, right? Moving from something that's a manufacturing specific ERP to a broader tier one ERP?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And actually, I think the one of the deciding factors for them was actually the flexibility of Dynamics. Um, they're they were really looking at it as a Dynamics SAP. I don't even know that they were considering staying with that legacy system.
Mhm.
Um, but they really liked the fact that they could go in and customize and, have developers do stuff. Double-edged sword at the time because they unfortunately went down the route of, well, let's just recreate a lot of the stuff from the old system in the new system instead of, going through like a true business process evaluation and like, okay, how can we improve the business by using this new tool and this new technology? Like, how can it enhance our business? At the time, and we're going back to 2008, 2009. It was very much all right, well, we've got this great platform that we can now do development stuff in, and ended up with a lot of customization. So that actually was a big differentiator for them. They didn't use a lot of the manufacturing aspects and dynamics to their full potential. To be honest, it was pretty again, like, let's make the transactions get us the end result that we want and make it simple for our users. So
Okay. You mentioned, they appreciated the flexibility, or that was a big draw to Dynamics, and obviously us both being consultants and seeing the growth in the dynamic space, that is a huge part of it, right? The being agile,
yep,
having continuous updates in an evergreen system's a huge sell. Now,
absolutely.
consulting flexibility also hugely important. And one of the key skills for consultants, PMs, projects in general, implementations in general. What other key things, I think you even maybe have an acronym you like to use, are the biggest attributes you find for a consultant or for someone in your role?
Yeah, I came up with a little acronym, and it's kind of silly and nerdy, just as kind of preparing for this conversation. But I kind of thought about four things that I think really make a good, strong consultant. And don't want to come off sounding the wrong way, but I think of it as fatness, FAAT, flexible, adaptable, accountable, and teachable. So I think flexibility, obviously, like, we never know what's going to come up on a project from project to project. Sometimes even day to day, you may be working on, uh, preparing for delivering a workshop, and then the next day you're writing up a new enhancement, or, testing out some integration, or, you've just got to be flexible on how you're going to spend your day, and what you've planned is not always going to go as planned. And just being able to be adaptable on the fly, kind of goes along with that. I think also being able to adapt to different industries, different business models, because not every business is the same. And, as consultants, we're not on a project forever. We're working with different businesses, whether it's a couple of months or a longer engagement of, multiple years. Eventually, you're going to be doing something new. You're going to be working with a new type of business. They approach how they do business in a different way, and, what works for one industry doesn't always work for another. So you've got to be able to adapt your skill set, your knowledge to those different industries. And then, just kind of rounding out my silly acronym, accountable. If you're not accountable for your work, and you're not, um, you can't be held responsible, or like that people can count on you to do what you say you're going to do, what you've committed to do, I think consulting may not necessarily be the right role for you. Like, just being honest, I think it does take a degree of accountability, right? You've got to really own your work. You've got to care about um, improving the way that our clients do business, and not just like, okay, we installed this new great thing. Like, we got to be accountable for the end result, and the end result is that they want to see some improvement in how things operate, or that their process is more efficient, or that their bottom line has increased, or whatever it is that our clients are trying to achieve. Like, at the end of the day, we got to be accountable to that. And then teachable, the last thing, goes back to your an ever changing, always new releases, always new functionalities and features coming out in Dynamics. Like, the amount of investment that Microsoft is putting into the project, or the product, is fantastic. It's also a lot to keep up with. So, like, keeping up on your knowledge, being able to be taught new things by other, consultants and coworkers and other project members, um, being a self-starter to some extent, and unlearning. Like, when I sat down and tried to think about what are the most important things for being a consultant, that's kind of what I came up with. And I think it's served me well so far, um, in my career.
Uh, I like it. I think there's a lot of ways we can correlate these things to what we do every day. So when I look at it, right, flexible and adaptable from a consultant's point of view, you hit it, part of it already, right? We're going to have a different company every project. It might be a different industry, even if you're a manufacturing specific partner or manufacturing specific ERP. Is it food and beverage, or now we making bikes, or now we
Yep.
making electronic circuit boards? Not every consultant is going to come from those industries and have the requisite knowledge. I mean, I look at the past 4 years or so here. I did pork manufacturing for the first time. I have a company we're working with now that's just pure distribution. We've done coffee, we've done life sciences, and companies making pharmaceutical drugs. So it it is a wide range. I myself got that start from manufacturing photonics, as I mentioned. Didn't know anything going in, but learned a lot while I was there that then helped me later on as a consultant working with similar types of industries. So that is a big piece of it. And in a similar vein, all partners will have their own methodology, their own culture, their own way of doing things. But you get into a project, it's not going to be 100% that way each time, right? Your
Yep.
clients have things they want to do, and you need to align with them and work in tandem and in a partnership. So you have to be willing to adapt and not right size. I don't think that's the right word, but really make sure that, yeah, your end goal is still the same. That's why you had that methodology or process in the first place, but there might be some concessions to align with this client that were different from the last one, or this team that was different from the last one, right? Yeah, I know you and I were talking about something else recently, and you were saying you've really gotten into warehouse detours and the mobile device
Yep.
steps. And, I was watching something recently on some of the companies who have started rolling out warehouse only mode. And I know we've
Hmm.
been doing that a little bit here with some of our clients. And that's brought a lot of new companies and industries to us, because previously, right, it was more built on you're using Dynamics, and that's why we bought this warehouse management system. It's gotten good enough now where companies can use that as a tool if they're on other ERPs or order
Yep.
management systems,
Yeah,
right?
it can stand on its own 100%. Yeah.
And so when it comes to, yeah, being flexible, being adaptable, being teachable, having to learn that stuff, and then in turn translate that, and how do we educate our clients and the rest of the community are really big challenges for us.
Yep.
So I like that acronym a lot. I like the idea of calling it teaching. We have a few people on our team. One of our great manufacturing consultants taught high school math for 14 years, but has an engineering background. And her style works really well with translating things to end users who maybe don't aren't as technical savvy, right? Or
Hmm.
coming from a green screen and now transitioning to a cloud ERP. So yeah, both from our learning style and our teaching style and educating clients, I think that's huge. So I love that fatness, and yeah, let's make sure people don't take it the wrong way and get offended. But two A's.
Your comment about teaching, like I I think more and more I try and take that approach uh, when I'm doing a workshop or going through a design session or going through a piece of functionality with a client. It's sometimes it's so difficult because we've done a certain, you've done a transfer order or whatever the transaction or process is, you've done it 1,000 times, and you get kind of it gets just kind of repetitive. But remembering that this may be the first time that somebody's seeing this, or they're just learning this concept, trying to take that teacher mentality, like I think that's a great thing for all of us as consultants to keep in mind, not just being teachable, but taking on that teacher mentality. You mentioned a couple of our coworkers that were teachers. I at one point thought I might want to be a teacher. My mom's a teacher. Shout out to mom.
Little
um,
known fact, I was a substitute teacher for elementary school
wow.
and when I was a high school and college student, so I have a little bit of it myself. That the teaching that age is quite interesting. You learn a lot about patience for sure.
Yep. But no, I think it's a good mentality to have as well. Yep.
And I think in a related note or vein, we've already hit upon how projects are different and whether it's industry or whatever, I think it's also our roles as consultants, right? We try to say what is a consultant, what do we do on a daily basis, but think about all the different types of consulting projects we could engage in. You could be in a pure staff aug where you are not doing the implementation guidance and advisory. You're essentially paid by that company to do what they tell you to do, right? They might
Yep.
not have the skill set, they might not have the people, they might not have the time, and they just need you to do the dirty work. It might be pure advisory services where they have a lot of really super skilled resources, technical, functional solution architects, and they just need somebody to do more of that governance and second pair of eyes, second opinion. Or it might be we need to bring in all your resources, right? Functional
Yep.
consultants, developers, TAs, and do the full implementation cycle. So that's important for us, I think, and companies to have that, to know those expectations, to
Hmm.
be flexible to those, and make sure that when you're on a project, you have the right mindset that correlates with what the objective of that project is.
Yep.
And to do that requires a lot of another thing you and I wanted to talk about, which is preparation. How do we prepare for our job, for our projects, for reviews, whatever it might be that, comes up in a consulting day-to-day life. So I know you have an opinion on that and how you do it yourself. So
I, I if I had to take a guess, I would put myself in the may spend slightly too much time preparing category. Um, I really like to have a plan going into whatever it is that I'm, especially anytime I'm spending time with the client, like a design workshop or a build workshop, where we're trying to accomplish a you know, uh, set topic or set number of tasks, whatever it is that we're trying to get through. I put in the time to prepare. Like, I don't want to just say, "Oh, I know sales orders, I can wing it." I've been burned by that before. Like, just being honest, have tried that approach, and even after working with Dynamics for what is it, almost almost 15 years now, I guess. Um, Even those things that you've done hundreds and hundreds of times, I've found that if I don't have at least some high level notes or a plan, or I've gone through it and just kind of like, all right, I'm going to do this and this, and I'm going to use these pieces of data, and I'm going to kind of tell this story as I'm going. I just don't feel right when it gets down to execute. And um, I really think that time spent preparing for whatever it is that you're doing, again, whether it's a presentation where you're for an hour you're sitting up and talking and everybody's listening, or it's an interactive a working session where you and the client are hashing out the details of a process and you're designing something. Like I I I still put in the time to kind of prepare the topics and have that kind of framework of what the conversation's going to be like, even if it's just some bullet points. I've just found that that helps me to be successful. It helps me to stay on track. It helps to get a better outcome, really. Like we tend to land on what we need to accomplish. We tend to talk through what we need to. Um, some of the something that I read in, and I don't even remember which book it was. I read a lot of stuff, but you know, taking a process mentality to the way that we do things instead of an event mentality, I think is really important. And the difference there is, like, an event is the thing. So if I've got a workshop, it's that date on the calendar where I'm gonna meet with the client and talk about X, Y, and Z. That's an event-driven mentality. A process-driven mentality is kind of everything that leads up to that. So the scheduling of the meeting and making sure that I've got an agenda and we've got the right amount of time and the right people are there. The preparation of the topics and making sure that everybody knows what we're going to talk about. I have again my plan and like all the things that lead up to the execution of the event. Having that mindset of taking a process approach as opposed to an event approach, I think is just a it's a an approach that leads to success. And I've said success several times here, but I just I feel like that's a good way to describe what I'm striving for. Not necessarily like perfection, just like a successful outcome that that you've got. Um, you've achieved what you want to achieve.
I really like the answer. I'm slightly exposed because I admitted to you before we started that I was not prepared for this meeting and interview. Luckily, to your
It's
point,
okay.
you always are. So you sent me some great bullets that I think we're able to work with, and hopefully it didn't show too much during this chat so far. But yeah, preparation is huge, right? So having that plan, like you talked about, what do you want to achieve in that workshop? What are the goals you're going for? Having out your schedule, maybe going through it. If you're doing a presentation, doing dry runs, right?
Mhm.
Record yourself and see, did that go how I expected it to go before you
Yep.
get to the event? And then also having a backup plan, because once again, need to be flexible, need to be adaptable. Maybe you get into that meeting and you're hit out of nowhere with something you didn't expect. Either the client said, oh, this is not what we planned on going over in this meeting, they have a different approach, or somebody doesn't show up, or God forbid you can't be there because something comes up. And
Mhm.
you have to be able to deal with those things in a professional way, and in a way where you can immediately lay out what the backup plan is. So
Yep.
I really like that answer. I think I think all of us can always be more prepared.
It's a balance though, right? Because you can't be prepared to the point that you can't adapt and you can't be flexible, right?
Right.
You've got to, like, as you said, you got to have either a backup plan or, when they do throw in that monkey wrench or they take you down, that path out into left field and you're, 30 minutes later, you're like, how did we even get here?
Yeah.
You can still, either
Rein them back
address
in.
whatever topic has come up or maneuver your way back to the topic at hand. So it's always a balancing act for sure.
It is absolutely. I know both of us are slightly short on time, so maybe we'll hit a couple
Sure.
last quicker questions,
Okay.
Andy. So, we mentioned SoCal together, and we unfortunately did not get to go to the fun amusement park that was very close to where we both were. But is there a favorite place you like to travel or have been to, or maybe wanting to go to?
Um, I can answer all of those quickly. So, favorite travel place, I would say just as a whole, We like to go to Marco Island in Florida. It's a just a favorite family spot. We've been going there most years for probably the last, I'd say, 10 or so years. It's just the beaches are great there. It's low key. We're, I guess, maybe somewhat gluttons for punishment. We go there in the summer. So it's super hot, but it's also, I mean, it feels very relaxed. You can leave your stuff on the beach and walk a mile away and come back 2 hours later and nothing's been messed with. Not crowded,
Although now that people
which
know
is
you
what I
do
like.
that, then it's out there.
If they really want my 10-year-old Bluetooth speaker, they're welcome to it.
Full
Um,
of sand.
so yeah, exactly. So we're big fans of Marco. Um, You mentioned amusement parks. While I'm not always a huge fan of crowds and lines and waiting in line, especially, I am partial to the Hulk ride at Universal in Orlando. I think that's a great ride. So,
Very
um,
nice.
as far as travel places that we'd like to go, Croatia is on Stacy and I's travel bucket list, and somebody else that you talked to, Mr. Grayson Holcomb, has been there recently. He gave me some tips, so maybe
Everyone I've
someday.
spoken to that's been to Croatia says it's amazing. It's on
Yeah,
my list as well. So
yeah.
I'll be jealous if you get there before me. Uh, Obviously, the name of this podcast and branding is Dynamics Unplugged. How do you unplug from work? What do you do to kind of keep yourself sane?
A lot of stuff. I I uh I think I'm one of those jack of all trades, master of none kind of guys. I like to dabble in different things. So,
Except for dynamics,
um,
we'll let everyone know you're a master of dynamics.
yes. um, one of the things I got into over the last couple of years is building scale models. So you think like either model cars, model military stuff, even the little model figures that are like 2 inches tall,
Yep.
building, painting, that kind of stuff. Um, Honestly, I've probably done more collecting of the kits than building. I'll get to that
It
eventually.
happens.
Um, we also have a great piece of property here where we do a lot of gardening, flower gardens, vegetable gardens, that kind of stuff. So I'm outdoors a lot. It's hopefully starting to actually turn to spring here. So
To
I'll be doing
say
more of
your
that.
area probably not there quite yet, but
Not quite, but it's turning the corner, I think. So a lot of that. We've got a small river here in town, so you'll find me out on my boat, fishing, kayaking, that kind of stuff.
what can you catch in this river?
Catfish, bass, um, a lot of
Very nice.
catfish. Yeah,
We have another member on our team who's a big fisher, so we'll have to
I'm a
keep you
catch and
guys
release
chatting.
guy, so
Okay, fair enough.
yeah.
We started off the conversation with how you got into consulting and your career maneuvering. Do you have any advice for anybody looking to maybe get into dynamics or consulting?
Um, I would say um, there's a ton of great resources out there, whether it's the official Microsoft Learn stuff and you like, more of a reading type approach and you want to, go through the different modules or just pick a topic and dive into it. There's tons of people that do great um, series on YouTube, other podcast. Like there are so many different ways that you can learn and get exposure to the product, whether you've got access to the system or not. I think just kind of picking a topic that interests you and diving into it. Like if warehouse is your thing, learn up on the warehouse management module. As you said earlier, there's so much functionality there. You could just nerd out for hours. If you're a finance person, which I'm not, and you're into ledgers and balance sheets and all that kind of stuff,
The new tax calculation service?
yeah.
Super exciting.
But I think find whatever it is that from a business or a functional perspective interests you and just like learn everything you can and maybe try different ways of learning and then get yourself access at some point, get a demo environment somehow or uh, find a mentor that can maybe help you out. I guess I don't have any specific advice on how to get your hands in and play, but uh, I think really just finding a topic that interests you and like having that be your springboard into you know, becoming knowledgeable and like how would you translate that to something that you do today, whether it's your current job in the business that you work in, or you maybe just an industry that you're familiar with and you've worked in the past of like, oh, um I used to you know drive a forklift in a factory, and I can equate like the things that I did when I was receiving goods and putting them away, and I could like try and explain that to somebody using dynamics terminology. You give yourself that challenge of finding a friend or a, a s- a spouse or significant other or whatever, and like test your knowledge, your ability to explain some concept of dynamics to them. I think that's a good way to learn, is learning by teaching. Um,
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't think I ever expected to be a consultant or still be using Dynamics this many years later. What really interested me early on was I got into master planning and I'm like, oh, okay, this is just math and this parameter does this and controls this setting. And some of it's going to be hard math and some of it is there for decisions. That's why we have planners, right? It's making
mhm,
suggestions over here's what your options are. And for me, I was able to figure out, hey, we look at coverage groups and there's 50 fields on one coverage group, but how will we ultimately break down what we're trying to do? What do we want our planners and our buyers to see on a daily basis, and what decisions do we want them to make? So I like that approach, right? It's the process, not the event. It's
yep.
explaining it in a way that's more broken down for those functional users, if that's what your role is. So I really like that.
Yeah. I guess I think my last thing, and I try and do this myself, is to stay humble and not assume that you know everything, and actually expect that you're not going to know everything, and always be trying to learn something new, whether it's a new module or just new functionality or just something that you haven't used before. Not being afraid to reach out and say, hey, I don't know how this works, or I expect this to do something differently, and like asking the Drew Lensacks and the whoever else is of the world, like, hey, have you ever experienced this? Have you seen this kind of scenario? How would you approach this? And just leveraging the community. There's a ton of super smart people in the dynamics community, and I think for the most part everybody's willing to help each other out. And know that you've got a friend out there somewhere to ask questions to.
That's true. I love it. Andy Z, this has been great. Thank you so much for
Yep,
your time.
you're welcome. Thanks for having me, Drew.